The Industrial Revolution stands as one of the most significant periods in human history, marking a profound transformation in the way societies functioned, economies developed, and technology advanced. Spanning from the late 18th century to the mid-19th century, this era was characterized by the transition from agrarian economies to industrial powerhouses. This shift reshaped the world, influencing every aspect of life, from work and social structures to urbanization and global trade. The story of the Industrial Revolution is not just one of technological innovation, but also one of human resilience, struggle, and adaptation. In the quiet villages of late 18th century England, life was deeply rooted in tradition. The majority of the population lived in rural areas, working as farmers, artisans, or small-scale craftsmen. Their lives were governed by the rhythms of nature and the seasons, with most labor done by hand or with the help of animals. The village community was close-knit, with families often living in the same area for generations, passing down skills and knowledge from parent to child. However, beneath this seemingly unchanging surface, forces of change were brewing. The demand for goods, both domestically and internationally, was growing. The British Empire, with its vast colonies, provided a wealth of raw materials and a market for finished products. Merchants and entrepreneurs sought ways to increase production to meet this rising demand. It was in this context that the seeds of the Industrial Revolution were sown. One of the first sparks of change came from the textile industry. The traditional method of spinning and weaving cloth was slow and labor-intensive, limiting the amount of fabric that could be produced. In 1764, James Hargreaves invented the spinning jenny, a machine that allowed a single worker to spin multiple threads at once. This invention significantly increased productivity, reducing the time needed to produce yarn. Around the same time, Richard Arkwright developed the water frame, a machine that used water power to drive the spinning process. Arkwright's invention led to the establishment of the first factories, where large numbers of workers could produce textiles on an unprecedented scale. But it was the invention of the steam engine by James Watt that truly revolutionized industry. While earlier versions of the steam engine existed, Watt's improvements in the 1770s made it more efficient and practical for widespread use. The steam engine provided a reliable and powerful source of energy that could be used not only in factories, but also in transportation, such as steamships and locomotives. This marked the beginning of a new era, where machines powered by steam began to replace manual labor. As factories began to spring up across England, the nature of work and life changed dramatically. The factory system centralized production, bringing together large numbers of workers under one roof. This shift led to the migration of people from rural areas to cities in search of employment. Cities like Manchester, Birmingham, and Leeds rapidly expanded as they became hubs of industrial activity. The transition from rural to urban life was not without its challenges. The influx of people into cities created overcrowded and unsanitary living conditions. Workers often lived in cramped, poorly built tenements with little access to clean water or adequate sanitation. Diseases such as cholera and typhus spread rapidly in these conditions, leading to high mortality rates. The working conditions in factories were harsh and unforgiving. Workers, including women and children, labored for long hours, often 12 to 16 hours a day in dangerous and unhealthy environments. The work was repetitive and monotonous, with little regard for the safety or well-being of the workers. Accidents were common, and those injured on the job received little or no compensation. Despite these hardships, many had no choice but to endure these conditions, as the factory was their only source of livelihood. The rise of the factory system also led to significant social changes. The traditional social structure, which was based on land ownership and agriculture, began to erode. A new working class emerged, made up of individuals who depended on wages from factory work to survive. This new class was distinct from the wealthier middle and upper classes, who owned the factories and controlled the means of production. The Industrial Revolution was driven by a series of technological innovations that transformed various industries. In addition to the textile industry, other sectors such as iron and steel production, transportation, and agriculture were also revolutionized. The iron and steel industry saw significant advancements with the development of new methods for producing iron and steel in larger quantities and at lower costs. The introduction of coke as a fuel in the smelting process, replacing charcoal, allowed for the mass production of iron. Henry Cort's invention of the puddling process in 1784 further improved the quality of iron, making it stronger and more versatile. These developments laid the foundation for the construction of railways, bridges, and buildings, enabling the expansion of infrastructure on an unprecedented scale. Transportation also underwent a dramatic transformation during the Industrial Revolution. The steam engine, initially used in factories, was adapted for use in transportation, leading to the development of steamships and locomotives. In 1707, Robert Fulton launched the first commercially successful steamboat, the Clermont, which operated on the Hudson River in the United States. This innovation revolutionized maritime travel, making it faster and more reliable. The introduction of the steam locomotive had an even greater impact. In 1825, George Stephenson's locomotion number 1 became the first steam-powered locomotive to carry passengers on a public railway. The success of this venture led to the rapid expansion of railways across Britain and eventually around the world. Railways connected cities and regions, facilitating the movement of goods and people. This not only boosted trade, but also contributed to the spread of ideas and cultural exchange. Agriculture, too, was transformed during the Industrial Revolution. The introduction of new machinery, such as the mechanical reaper and the threshing machine, increased agricultural productivity. These innovations allowed farmers to cultivate larger areas of land and produce more food, supporting the growing urban population. The agricultural revolution, which had begun earlier in the 18th century, now accelerated, with new crop rotation techniques and selective breeding of livestock, further enhancing productivity. While the Industrial Revolution brought about unprecedented economic growth and technological progress, it also had a profound human cost. The rapid pace of industrialization and urbanization led to significant social upheaval, with many workers facing exploitation, poor working conditions, and a lack of rights. Child labor was a widespread and particularly tragic aspect of the Industrial Revolution. Children as young as 5 or 6 years old were employed in factories, mines, and other industrial settings. They were often forced to work long hours in dangerous conditions, performing tasks that were physically demanding and hazardous. The use of child labor was driven by the need for cheap labor, as children were paid a fraction of what adults earned. The working conditions for adults were equally grim. Factories were often poorly ventilated, with little natural light and constant exposure to dust, fumes, and noise. Workers faced the constant risk of injury from the machinery, and those who were injured were often dismissed without compensation. The lack of safety regulations meant that accidents were common and the consequences could be devastating. The grueling work, low wages, and appalling living conditions led to widespread social unrest. Workers began to organize and demand better conditions, leading to the rise of labor unions and movements advocating for workers' rights. One of the most notable examples of resistance was the Luddite movement, which emerged in the early 19th century. The Luddites were groups of workers who protested against the introduction of machines that they believed threatened their jobs. They resorted to breaking into factories and smashing machinery in an attempt to halt the spread of industrialization. Although the Luddite movement was ultimately suppressed, it highlighted the deep-seated anger and frustration felt by many workers during this period. In response to the growing unrest, social reformers began to advocate for change. Figures such as Robert Owen, a factory owner and social reformer, called for improvements in working conditions, better housing for workers, and the establishment of educational institutions. Owen's efforts to create model communities where workers could live and work under humane conditions were pioneering, but met with limited success. The pressure for reform eventually led to the introduction of legislation aimed at improving workers' rights. The Factory Acts, passed in the early 19th century, sought to regulate working hours, particularly for women and children, and to improve safety standards in factories. While these laws represented a step forward, they were often poorly enforced, and many workers continued to suffer under harsh conditions.
The impact of the Industrial Revolution was not confined to Britain. The innovations and changes that originated in Britain soon spread to other parts of the world, transforming economies and societies on a global scale. In Europe, countries such as France, Germany, and Belgium began to adopt and adapt the new technologies and industrial practices. These countries faced different challenges and opportunities compared to Britain, including varying levels of access to natural resources and differences in political and social structures. Nevertheless, by the mid-19th century, industrialization had taken hold across much of Europe, leading to the rise of powerful industrial economies. In the United States, the Industrial Revolution took on a unique character, shaped by the country's vast size, abundant natural resources, and relatively open society. The American industrial experience was marked by rapid innovation and a spirit of entrepreneurship. The development of the American system of manufacturing, characterized by the use of interchangeable parts and mass production techniques, revolutionized industries such as textiles, firearms, and eventually automobiles. The spread of industrialization also had significant implications for the global economy. The demand for raw materials, such as cotton, coal, iron, and rubber, drove the expansion of colonial empires as European powers sought to secure resources from Africa, Asia, and the Americas. The exploitation of these resources often came at a high cost to indigenous populations, who were subjected to forced labor, displacement, and other forms of exploitation. At the same time, the global trade networks established during this period facilitated the exchange of goods, ideas, and technologies, contributing to the spread of industrialization beyond Europe and North America. By the late 19th century, countries such as Japan had begun to industrialize, adopting Western technologies and practices while retaining elements of their own cultural identity. The Industrial Revolution left an indelible mark on the world, shaping the course of history in ways that continue to resonate today. It laid the foundation for the modern industrial economy, with its emphasis on mass production, technological innovation, and global trade. The social and economic changes that emerged during this period, including the rise of the working class, the development of labor unions, and the expansion of urban centers, have had lasting effects on societies around the world. The technological advancements of the Industrial Revolution paved the way for further innovation in the 20th and 21st centuries. The principles of mechanization, standardization, and efficiency that were developed during this era continue to influence industries ranging from manufacturing to information technology. However, the Industrial Revolution also brought about significant challenges that persist to this day. The environmental impact of industrialization, including pollution, deforestation, and the depletion of natural resources, remains a critical issue. The exploitation of workers and the inequalities that arose during this period continue to shape discussions about labor rights and social justice. In reflecting on the Industrial Revolution, it is essential to recognize both its achievements and its costs. It was a period of remarkable progress, driven by human ingenuity and the desire for improvement. But it was also a time of hardship and struggle as societies grappled with the profound changes that industrialization brought. The story of the Industrial Revolution is a reminder of the complex interplay between technological progress and social change. It highlights the need for thoughtful consideration of the impacts of innovation and the importance of balancing economic growth with the well-being of individuals and communities. As we continue to navigate the challenges and opportunities of the modern world, the lessons of the Industrial Revolution remain as relevant as ever.